Hi guys, welcome back to My Life as Roxy, and today we have something totally different. I decided that I'm going to do a true crime series on my channel. This is just to test out true crime, and as you guys can see with the thumbnail, I'm starting or not really starting. I did upload a previous video, but that was from another channel. I just re-uploaded on my current channel. So this is basically like the first official true crime video of this channel, and it is about the Jeffrey Dahmer case, which he's also known as the Milwaukee Monster or the Milwaukee Cannibal. So guys, before I start with the story, I just want to ask you guys to please subscribe. It takes a lot of time to research these stories and like to memorize them and to get your facts straight so that you don't give false information. And then I also want to tell you guys, I mean no disrespect, like this is my disclaimer, I mean no disrespect to any of the families or people involved in the story. I am just trying to tell the story for educational purposes, and I mean no disrespect. I might leave out some parts and I might make mistakes, so just bear with me. So guys, let's start with the story. So Jeffrey Dahmer was born in 1960, 21st May 1960. He was he was the first son of Lionel Dahmer as well as Joyce Dahmer. Lionel Dahmer was a chemistry student, a chemistry student, and they had Jeffrey. Now two sources say two different things. One source says, or a few sources say, that Jeffrey was kind of not really given a lot of attention when he was an infant, and another source say that Jeffrey was spoiled with a lot of love. Parents loved him so much and they just like showered him with a lot of love. When Jeffrey was in grade school, when he went to grade school, Jeffrey's mother just like she became more, how can I say, demanding of his father's attention. Jeffrey's mother would always pick fights with neighbors. She was actually known as a person that required a lot of attention and pity from Jeffrey's father. And because of Jeffrey's mother, and she was known as an, or they said that Jeffrey's mother was a hypochondriac and she suffered from depression, and because of this Jeffrey's mother required a lot of attention from his father, and his father was like away from home a lot, because he was a chemistry student, so he's like a lot, he was in the lab a lot, at school a lot, and when he was home his mother required like a lot of attention from the father, and they always fought, as according to Jeffrey that he could remember, that his parents were always in some kind of quarrel. So it's also stated that Jeffrey's mother tried to commit suicide, but she was unsuccessful. And this whole situation with Jeffrey's mother and her requiring a lot of attention, and um, on the later time she was just in bed the whole time. She suffered from weaknesses, which is, according to the people, they said there was not really anything wrong with her, because that's why they labeled her as a hypochondriac. And so because of Jeffrey's mother demanding so much attention from the father, and the father being at university most of the times, Jeffrey was really kind of neglected. Even one teacher said that she felt that Jeffrey felt neglected in a report card or something like that. Now I know all of you are probably curious how Jeffrey's curiosity for dismemberment and dissection began. And according to Jeffrey's father, Lionel Dahmer, when Jeffrey was 4 years old, his father found bones under the house, animal bones under the house. And Jeffrey's father could remember that Jeffrey was so thrilled when they found the ball when they found the bones. And he just liked the sound that the bones made. And after that, Jeffrey would normally search for bones around the house. And then after that, Jeffrey started collecting dragonflies and large insects in jars, and moved from that to collecting carcasses, roadkill, and animal carcasses, roadkill along the road. And he just used those animals, he dismembered them, and according to his friends, he just wanted to see how all the animals fit together. He also had like a lot of jars where he stored the animals in acid or acetone. I'm not really sure. He stored all the animals in those jars in a tool shed, his family tool shed, behind the backyard, or he just dissected the animals in the backyard. Jeffrey did this for quite a while, and is what he spent most of his time doing. So Jeffrey then moved, or his family moved twice. The first time they moved in 1966. They moved from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They moved from Milwaukee to Ohio, Doylestown. I'm not really sure how you pronounce it, but I'm going to leave the name on the screen so that you guys can see it. They moved from Milwaukee to Ohio, and in that year, or in that same time, Joyce gave birth to her second son, and she allowed Jeffrey to name her son, and he named his brother David. So they started a new family there, and that was also the same year that Jeffrey's father, Lionel Dahmer, graduated from university and got a new job so that he could provide for his family. So after they moved again the second time, and this time they moved to Bardstown, Ohio. And they moved there in 1988. No, sorry. They moved there in 1968. And 2 years after the move, one day while they were having dinner, Jeffrey asked his father how he could use bleach to preserve animal bones, His father was kind of excited because he thought that this was Jeffrey showing interest into chemistry, and he was so excited, and he demonstrated and showed his son Jeffrey how to use bleach to preserve animal bones. And eventually Jeffrey took that method and used it with his animal bone collecting. So now we're coming to Jeffrey's adolescency, teenage years. And Jeffrey went to a high school, but Jeffrey was seen as he was seen as the odd guy. He was the oddball. He was an outcast. And when he hit puberty, he discovered that he was gay. And even during that time that he discovered that he was gay, he had a very brief relationship with another teenage boy, but they never had any intercourse or sexual intercourse. But he had a brief relationship, but he never told his parents about him being gay. Maybe it's because that time it wasn't really that acceptable. I really don't know. He just never told his parents that he was gay. And so Jeffrey, when he was 14, he started drinking really, like he started drinking beer and hard liquor. And he even told his friends that his alcohol was his medicine. And I think that's when Jeffrey's alcohol problem started. Now, even though Jeffrey was seen as an outcast or an oddball, he was also known as a class clown, and they used to call the certain thing that he did. He faked epileptical seizures. Yeah, he faked epileptical seizures, and they called it pulling a Dahmer. There was also like a certain time where they took photos, yearbook photos, and Jeffrey appeared in photos that he wasn't supposed to be in honor society and all those things. So he was like, he had like a fun spirit to him, even though he was seen as an outcast or an oddball or not really one of the popular kids. But later on, Jeffrey like really got obsessed, or like he just fixated his mind on a jogger that used to jog. He was like apparently the jogger was very attractive, and that was the first time that Jeffrey started fantasizing about how to get men, or how to get someone unconscious and make sexual use of their body. So there was also a time that Jeffrey like he hid in the woods, and it was like 16. Yeah, I was 16, and he just hid in the woods waiting for the jogger to come along. And that particular day the jogger didn't run that route or didn't run past him, so yeah, the jogger kind of missed. And that was the first time Jeffrey admitted to trying to attack someone. In 1977, Jeffrey's grades declined, and that was also like the time his family, or his mother and father, tried to fix their marriage by going for counseling. But later that year, in September 1977, Jeffrey's mother, Joyce, had a brief affair with someone else, and they decided to have a divorce after that. Jeffrey's father then moved out of the house in early 1978, and his mother and brother remained in the house with Jeffrey. But during the divorce proceedings, or after the divorce was finalized, Jeffrey's mother and brother moved to relatives in another town. I'm going to put the town in this, the name of the town in the screen so that you can see where his mother and brother moved to, leaving Jeffrey alone at home. Jeffrey graduated from high school, and after high school, 2 weeks after he graduated from high school, was the time that Jeffrey murdered his first victim. Now, while Jeffrey's father moved out earlier and his mother moved out after the divorce was finalized, Jeffrey was alone at home. He was 18 at the time. He was alone, and while he was on his way home, I'm going to leave the date. I'm not sure about the date. I'm going to leave the date on the screen. That specific date, Jeffrey drove home and saw a hitchhiker. So he stopped, and that, I'm not sure whether the hitchhiker was on his way to a rock concert or he just came from a rock concert. But Jeffrey convinced the victim, which was the hitchhiker, to go with him to his house and drink and party on. So the hitchhiker, or the victim, went with Jeffrey. He was 19 or 18 at the time, about to turn 19. He went to Jeffrey's home. They spent there for a few hours drinking and listening to music. And later that night, the victim decided to, the male victim, remember guys, this is a male victim. The male victim decided that he wanted to go home. Jeffrey, I quote, said that I did not want him to leave. Took a dumbbell. While the victim was sitting on a chair, he hit the victim with a dumbbell twice over the head, and he fell to the ground. He took the bar of the dumbbell and strangled him. After that, he removed the victim's clothes and masturbated over the corpse of the victim. He then took the body of the victim to the basement, and the following day he dismembered his very first victim. And put it in garbage bags and buried it in a shallow grave. A few weeks after that, Jeffrey decided to exhume the remains of his first victim, used acid to remove the flesh from the bones. And then he used the acid liquid. He flushed it down the toilet after he removed all the flesh from the bones. And then he used a sledgehammer to basically so that he could scatter the bones at the backyard. After he pulverized all the bones, he then scattered it at their backyard. Now, this was Jeffrey's first victim in 1978. After that, Jeffrey's father returned home and discovered that Jeffrey was living alone, and his father was actually encouraging him to further his studies, and they sent him to Ohio State University to study. But during this time, Jeffrey didn't really make use of this opportunity and basically was just wasting his parents' money, because he just dropped out of university. 3 months after that, he had a very, very, very low GPA. That was 0.45 out of 4. His GPA was really, he just ended up failing because he drank consistently during the time when he was in university. So after Jeffrey dropped out of university in January 1979, his father convinced Jeffrey to do something with his life, and his father convinced him to join the United States Army. Jeffrey then joined the army, and he was trained as a medical specialist. And then later on, he was stationed in West Germany as a combat medic. Now, during this time of Jeffrey being in the army from 1979 to 1981, Jeffrey raped two of his fellow army mates, and that later on came out where the victim spoke about the experience. The one victim he just raped once, and the second victim he raped over a period of 17 months. Now, because Jeffrey had this drinking problem, he still consistently drank during his time in the army, and later on the army just didn't see him to be suitable for the army anymore, and they discharged him in 1981, and he was sent to South Carolina for debriefing. And they gave him a plane ticket and told him that he could go anywhere in the country. Jeffrey decided to go to Florida, Miami, and he quote said that he wanted to get away from the cold and he wanted to live by his own means. He was just like, later on he admitted that he didn't really want to go back to his father, because his father to see him failing at something else once again. So basically he didn't want to like disappoint his father. So he got a job at a deli in Florida, or in Miami. He got a job at a deli, and he stayed at a motel. He rented a room at the motel. But after that, Jeffrey's drinking just like spiraled out of control, and he spent most of his money on alcohol, and he didn't pay his rent, and eventually he was evicted from the room in the motel. Then he still continued working at the deli and spent evenings on the beach. So I don't know, like the source wasn't really specific on whether he was homeless that time or he was just chilling on the beach. I'm not really sure. But then after that, Jeffries called his father and asked him if he could return home. And yeah, Jeffrey then went back home in 19 later on in 1981. Yeah, he lived with his father and his stepmother, and they just kept him preoccupied with duties and chores and made him like do different stuff around the house and also encouraged him to find a job. But Jeffrey was arrested for disorderly conduct and fined $60, and like his father tried to wean him off alcohol, but that wasn't really successful, and his parents just grew tired of Jeffrey's drinking and not being able to control his drinking, so they decided to send him to his grandmother, and there Jeffrey changed for a while. While he was staying with his grandmother, he went to church with his grandmother. He voluntarily did chores, and he was behaving really well, even though he was drinking and smoking. He was still drinking and smoking during this time, but he behaved really well. He even got a job at a blood laboratory during a blood lab during this time, and he kept his job for 10 months before he was laid off. Yeah, before he was laid off. Then Jeffrey, after he lost his job, he remained jobless for 2 years, and basically he just lived off any type of money that his grandmother gave him. In 1985, Jeffrey eventually got a job again at a chocolate factory. Now, whenever I think about a chocolate factory, he was a mixer in a chocolate factory, and whenever I think about a chocolate factory, I just think about Willy Wonka, the chocolate factory. And in 1985, Jeffrey frequently started visiting these gay bathhouses and clubs and bars, and he started engaging in sexual relation with other gay men. But Jeffrey also stated that during this time he really got like irritated by the movement that these men made, his sexual partners made. And Jeffrey was also into necrophilia, so he just wanted the men to lay still. He wanted a completely submissive partner. He didn't want anyone moving around. So in 1986, Jeffrey started drugging these men and raping their unconscious bodies. This happened approximately 12 times until the administration of these bathhouses removed Jeffrey's membership. So Jeffrey could not go to these bathhouses anymore, and afterwards Jeffrey then decided to venture on his own. He said like, okay, fine guys, I don't need you, I can do this on my own. I can still drug and rape these men on my own. And he started using nearby motels to lure these men to these motel rooms and drug and rape them. Now, I'm not exactly sure how many men he drugged and raped, but now we're going to go and move on to the second murder of Jeffrey Dahmer. Now in 1987, November the 20th November 1987, Jeffrey came from one of these bars or gay bars, I'm not really sure. Yeah, he went to a gay bar and he met a man, his second victim was 23 years old, and he lured his second victim to his house. So Jeffrey then, not his house, to the motel, the Ambassador motel that he was renting at the time for the night or for the evening, and Jeffrey lured him to this motel. Now, according to Jeffrey, he never wanted to hurt this victim or kill this victim. His only intention was to drug and rape him. And I don't know why he thinks that drugging and raping someone is okay and not killing them is not okay. I don't know, like Jeffrey's mind was just like totally twisted. So even trying to figure his thought process to figure out his thought process is gonna take you a lot of time, because I really don't know what went through that man's mind while he was doing these horrendous crimes. But then the next day when he woke up, when he was with his victim, the next day he woke up and found his victim laying underneath him. He was on top of the victim. The victim was laying underneath him with his chest crushed in, and it was like purple, blue, and Jeffrey's hands were bruised. Now, according to Jeffrey, he cannot recall anything that happened that night, and he said that he can't believe that he actually murdered this man because he could not remember anything that happened. Now, when Jeffrey was in this situation where he had to get rid of the body, he then went to a nearby store, he bought a suitcase, and he put the body in the suitcase, and he took the body to his grandmother's house where he lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Jeffrey then removed all the body parts, and then he filleted the bones from the meat, and later on he just took the bones, he took the meat and put it in garbage bags, and then took the bones and put it in a piece of sheet, and then used a sledgehammer to just like crush the bones really fine. And then he took all this and put it in the trash. He discarded it in the trash except for the skull. He kept the skull, I don't know, in the basement. Yeah, I think he kept the skull in the basement for a period of 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks Jeffrey took the skull and boiled it in a solution, in a Soilex solution, a Soilex and bleach solution. I think his thought process behind this was to like preserve the skull, to remove the skin and the meat from the skull, and to just keep the skull. So this wasn't really that successful, because after that, after he removed all the flesh from the skull, he then used the skull for whenever he needed to masturbate. He used the skull, but later on the skull was too brittle, so he had to like crush the skull, pulverize the skull, and then just disregard the skull. Jeffrey's third victim was a Native American 14-year-old male. But this really upsets me, because this was still a child. It was a 14-year-old child, a male prostitute that Jeffrey lured under the pretenses he would give this boy he'd give this 14-year-old boy $50 if he would pose for nude pictures. But when they went home, they engaged in sexual activity. After they engaged in sexual activity, Jeffrey drugged this little boy, and eventually he strangled him. And he then did the same process that he did with his second victim, removed all the limbs, and he did the same process as I explained earlier, and he preserved the skull by boiling it again in a certain type of solution in order. But then later on, he then also disregarded the skull, because the skull then again got too brittle. So with Jeffrey's fourth victim. On the 24th of March 1988, Jeffrey met a 22-year-old bisexual male at a club or bar called the Phoenix, a gay club or bar called the Phoenix. Jeffrey then asked the man if he would come home with him, give him $50, and whether he would spend the remainder of the night with him if he gave this man $50. The man agreed, and they went home to Jeffrey's grandmother's house. When they came home, Jeffrey gave him a drink that had drugs in, and when the man passed out, Jeffrey then strangled the man and dismembered his body and got rid of the body parts, or he did the same process like he did previously, got rid of the body parts in the dress, excluding the head, and then he tried to retain the skull again with the same method that he previously used, but then later on he pulverized the head because Jeffrey just didn't have like the correct method to retain the skull of his victims.